All right, good afternoon, everybody. I know we'll have a few more hopping on here as we get started, but we want to go ahead and start our Lunch and Learn. I am excited today that we have Brooke Anderson from Converge with us. Brooke is my go-to in all things marketing, social media, email, you name it. She's kind of on speed dial these days. So we're excited to have her. If you all are not receiving their Friday email updates, they do a fantastic job with marketing updates, trends, things like that. And she sent out one, I guess it was December, maybe, Brooke. And I was like, oh, this would be excellent about marketing trends for 2022, because as we all know, things have changed quite a bit over the last couple of years and how we're engaging our customers and just ways to reach out to the community. And Converge does such a fantastic job. So if you're not familiar with them, hopefully Brooke will share a little bit about all the many things they do. It seems like every day they're adding something to their list of things that they can help with. So she is a fantastic resource for us here at the Chamber, for all of our members. So we are really happy that she was able to take some time for us today to share. This is the first of a three-part series. We hope you'll join us again in March and April to learn more. So Brooke, with that, I'm just going to turn it right over to you because I know you have a lot to share. If you'll have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go, and we can check in with those, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end. But with that, Brooke, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to turn it right over.
All right. Well, thank you, Courtney, so much. We always love working with the Chamber and really appreciate all the wonderful resources they put out for the businesses in our area. So as Courtney mentioned, I work with Converge, and we are a full service marketing agency. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. And let me pull my presentation up here. So what we're here to talk about today are 2022 marketing trends. And what is really fascinating about this topic is that, we're having this collective worldwide experience with the pandemic. But now that we are 2 years into the pandemic, we can see how the changes have not only impacted our personal lives, but also there have been changes in terms of how it has impacted how consumers are interacting with businesses. So this is a really fascinating topic. I'm really excited to get to share it with you guys. So I said Converge is a full service marketing agency. And while that is true, we are a lot of other things as well. And those things have been important to us from day one. So while we eat, sleep, and breathe marketing, we are also firm believers in volunteering. Nearly everybody on our staff has a cause of choice. We are also project supporters for local organizations, nonprofit sponsors, and community engagers. So just as important as being a full service marketing agency, giving back to the community is one of our pillars. We have worked with all sorts of businesses of varying sizes, nonprofits, new entrepreneurs, you name it. We have pretty much worked in a lot of the businesses that you're familiar with here locally and then beyond the Shenandoah Valley as well. And these are just some of those examples. So what do we do? Well, we do a little bit of everything as a full service agency. So these are some of the services that we offer. So if at any point you're interested in any of these, let us know. We'd be happy to chat. We do pretty much everything for your business, from business cards to your digital marketing websites, vehicle wraps, and everything in between. And the thing that I love so much about my job is that, don't tell anybody, but really I am a glorified storyteller, and I have loved stories from the time I was a small child, and good marketing is grounded in storytelling. So that is one of the most fascinating things I get to do, is help businesses tell their story to the right audience in the right way so that it can make the biggest impact. So we're here to talk about marketing trends. And so there are a couple things I want you to remember as we go through this that will help us frame how we conceptualize these trends. First of all, I'm going to be using the word business a lot in this presentation, but I want to be very clear that these trends don't just apply to what we think of as traditional businesses. They also apply to organizations like the Chamber. They apply to nonprofits. They apply to solo entrepreneurs. So everyone can take note of these trends and apply them in the way that they see fit. There's going to be a lot of information, not only in this presentation, but in the other two. So people a lot of times get overwhelmed by the amount of information and things to do on the checklist when it comes to their marketing. But I just want to encourage you, start where you are with what you can and build upon it. Third, we have, again, had this collective experience worldwide in being in a global pandemic together. And we are at a point 2 years in where these trends are grounded in research. We have seen and tracked consumer behavior over these last 2 years. So these are trends, they're not fads. These are things that we are certain that in what the data is telling us, that these are things that need to be on our radar. These are not fly-by-night suggestions. And again, over the 3-part series, I'm going to tell you some things that may seem right away like you're like, that makes total sense. And then there are going to be some things where you're like, that seems pretty futuristic, and I'm not so sure that's ever going to apply. But remember, at one point, websites were futuristic. At one point, social media was futuristic. At one point, people were saying, how that social media thing, that's just going to be a passing thing. Now, those are hallmarks of marketing. So remember, everything was futuristic at one point. Some of these things you'll be able to implement sooner rather than later, but it's important to at least have them in your mind, at this point. Okay. The other thing that's really important, and I'm a firm believer in that, is I could give you a presentation about marketing trends, but if I don't give you any way to start thinking about how you actually implement these things and what the strategy is to implement them, I feel like I would be selling you short. So I want to go over 3 strategies that you can have in mind that literally after you get off this Zoom call could be implemented today in your business and in the way you think about your marketing. So I want to start there first to give us a firm foundation for the trends that we're going to be talking about. And again, for the marketing you're already doing. So when we talk about marketing, so much of it is based around content creation, whether that's, visual content, written content, a combination of both. So how do we most effectively communicate? We ground in marketing our content creation in what is called persuasive communication, and it consists of modes of persuasion. And the genius thing about this is you can not only use this in your business, but you can use this in your everyday life. If you are trying to persuade someone or convince someone, and please take note, I'm not saying manipulate them, but these modes of persuasion are the things that we naturally look for when we are evaluating if we can trust what someone is saying. And in business and in life, we're always trying to get people to trust us in what we are conveying to them. So the first one is called ethos, and that's just a fancy Latin word for credibility or character. So people are, and a lot of times this happens subconsciously, so remember that, but we're constantly evaluating people on, do they convey credibility or character? Logos is logic or reason. Basically, does what they say make sense? Are they giving solid advice? Are they saying things that are grounded in actual fact? And then the third one is called pathos, and that is emotion or connection. So when you combine credibility, logic, and emotion or connection, those fill the 3 buckets that humans need to say, yes, I feel like I can trust this person. Yes, I feel like I can trust this business. Now, does anybody have a guess about which 2 businesses are most comfortable with? Anybody? All right, no guesses. Okay, so I'm going to tell you. So the ones Oops, I have a chat message. Let's see. And Courtney says probably not pathos, and that is absolutely correct. So what businesses are most comfortable in conveying in terms of their content is their credibility and their logic. We've been in business for 30 years. We make the best tires in the business, and here's why. But what they often lack is the emotion or the connection. And when I talk about emotion, I don't mean high drama all the time. It can be things like humor as well. But if you're not conveying the why in terms of what you do, you're leaving so much on the table and you're not checking that box that people are looking for in terms of making sure you convey these three things. So we'll talk a little bit more about a good example of a company, two companies actually, that really do a great job with pathos. And we'll get to that in a minute. So when you combine these three things, plus you have done research into who exactly your target audience is, this is the trifecta for being able to communicate effectively. Now, there is one, what I call a forgotten mode of persuasion. So we always talk about the three, the big heavy hitters, but here's the other really important one. And especially in 2022, especially over the time of the pandemic, and it's called Kairos. And it basically means that you're sending the right message at the right time. All of you have experienced as business leaders or organization leaders having to pivot so quickly over these past 2 years and having to shift what your messages have been from sometimes hour to hour. And that is a wonderful example of Kairos in practice. It probably has felt a little bit like a trial by fire, but when you combine the three major modes of persuasion and you're sending the right message at the right time, that is when you are communicating at your top level. All right, the other part is storytelling. I told you I'm basically just a glorified storyteller. And one of the reasons that I love storytelling so much is because not only does it creatively explain so many different concepts, but it is the most memorable way to explain anything to anyone. There has been tons of research done that shows that humans remember stories far greater than they remember just facts being told at them. So if you're not using storytelling in your own business, I don't care what your business is, there's an opportunity to use storytelling. So when we think about storytelling and we think about modes of persuasion, we kind of have some examples here of how you can sort of start to implement those things. So credibility, one of the things is years in business. But don't just tell people you've been in business for 27 years. Tell them what was the idea that sparked the business? How did it get started? What were the big challenges? What were the big milestones you've encountered along the way? With logic, we're talking about advice that makes sense. But instead of just telling people bullet pointed bits of advice, tell it in a story of how someone came to you with an issue and you solved that challenge for them. And in terms of emotion and connection, really people are looking for stories they can see themselves in, right? So they're looking for, does this business relate to who I am? Do I feel that connection with them? And you want to help people understand that you were in it with them. Whatever your business is, you are in it with them. You're on their side. You're celebrating their success. You're helping them navigate issues. And most of all, you are doing it in an authentic way. All right. So those are modes of persuasion. Any questions about that? I'm going to kind of keep a fast tempo here to make sure I can hit everything. All right, so that's our foundational piece in terms of how we're going to frame these trends, but also the content we're creating in our businesses right now. The other really important thing is to talk about the buyer's journey roadmap. So the reason this is so important is because when people are making decisions on buying a service or a product, they're going through these different stages. And depending on which stage they're in, that's going to influence how you're marketing to them. So the first stage is awareness. So basically somebody realizes that they have an unsolved need or a problem and it's not being fulfilled, right? So maybe they are a solo entrepreneur out in Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro, and they're feeling like they're an island all unto themselves. And they realize this isn't the best way I could be working. I could be networking more. I could be connecting more. And so the chamber might be on their radar, right? But before the chamber comes on their radar, they're identifying that unfulfilled need. So the next thing that buyers do when they're in that awareness stage is they start conducting more research to figure out exactly what that unfulfilled need is and start to think about what the solution could be. Then they go into an interest stage. So they start researching kind of more specifically. So searching for options on Google, asking friends for recommendations, reading online articles, looking at reviews, things like that. They move from the interest stage into the consideration stage. And so now that they've seen some of the options out there, they start evaluating the specific options. Should I join the chamber? Should I join a BNI? And they're weighing these options. And then they're beginning to engage with the ones that they seem to think are the best fit and initiating whatever those next steps are. So going back to the tire example, I find 3 places that I can buy tires from, and I start making phone calls to check about pricing, how fast can you do it, things like that. Once they have done that, then they're in the decision stage. And so they are making a choice. Hey, I'm going to work with you. And the thing that you're going to want to be doing for them in this stage is validating the decision that they're making. So going back to the chamber, for instance, if I'm a new chamber member and I get a letter welcoming me, that makes me feel good about the dues that I just paid. That makes me feel like, oh, I'm really going to get a solution to this problem of feeling like I'm on an island by myself. And then when their email that tells me all the wonderful classes and webinars and events that the chamber is hosting shows up in my email box, then I feel even more supported by them. So the process with a customer or a consumer doesn't end when they hit the purchase button. It goes beyond that. You need to be validating their choice. And then after the decision-making stage comes the relationship nurturing stage, because you don't want them to just be a chamber member for 1 year. You want them to come back year after year. You want them to do business with you year after year. And so in this nurturing stage, they expect some additional support, guidance, and inspiration. So this is where things like email nurturing can be so impactful. This is where things like, doing simple actions like sending Christmas cards to your customers can make a big impact. You're basically nurturing them to have a lifetime investment with you. And you are building upon the trust that they've already shown you. Okay, so remember, 3 things that we're going to ground our marketing in and these trends in are the modes of persuasion, storytelling, and taking into consideration the buyer's journey. Any questions about that? Good? Okay. All right, so let's dive into the trends. So I'm going to put you guys on the spot a little bit because I have the advantage because I have the list of the trends, but you guys don't. So I'm curious to know if any of you have any guesses as to what some of these trends might be. Feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in.
I was going to say more video.
Okay, more video. That's a good one. Anybody else? No? Okay. All right. I won't keep you in suspense. Let's dive right in. More video is a great one, Courtney, and we will be talking about something along those lines in one of the sessions. Okay. So trend number 1 that we're going to talk about. Basically, the pandemic has changed consumers. It's changed their mental framework in how they are conceptualizing the purchases they're making and the businesses they're doing business with. And this is grounded not just in data, but also psychology. Basically, the psychology of consumers has been heavily impacted by the pandemic. So a quote that sort of sums this up really well is that we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. So people have found themselves in different positions throughout this pandemic. People's very livelihoods have been impacted, their health has been impacted, their expendable income has been impacted. The list goes on and on. So what you saw prior to the pandemic in terms of how your audience was segmented could look very different. What they're wanting from you could look different. How they're wanting it from you could look very different. So what exactly does that mean? So in 2022, when we think about consumers, here are some things to consider. First, previously we targeted audience. We talk about targeted audiences. Now we target audiences by subsections. So what does this mean for your business or your organization? So prior to the pandemic, you may have been pretty confident that your consumers fit into, let's say, 4 different buckets, whatever you identified those to be. Those buckets have now segmented out. Each bucket could contain 6 different subsections of that audience. So what that means is that when you are marketing, one of the trends that we are seeing is a hyper focus on targeting. That means that if you are, let's say, an insurance agent, you could be literally changing your market or your marketing based off of zip code. It could get that specific. People living in this area are having a different experience than people living one zip code over. That could be heavily influenced by pandemic cases. It could be heavily influenced by what the unemployment rate is. There is a hyper targeted trend that we're seeing for 2022. So most of you, again, probably have evaluated at some point your target audiences, but you need to take a look at what the subsections could possibly be. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Because of this hyper targeting, cookie cutter marketing just doesn't cut it anymore. There are some things that you can do in marketing where we can feel pretty confident, like we can take this strategy and replicate it for multiple businesses and it works. We plug in the details of that specific business and it will still work, right? But we're really not seeing that anymore. What the Augusta County Chamber needs to do to market effectively could be vastly different than what a Northern Virginia Chamber needs to do to target their audience. So cookie cutter marketing really doesn't cut it anymore. So to really hone in on those audience subsections that we're talking about, you have to know what is most important to them. So there was a study that has been done over the past 2 years of the pandemic. And while there is some variation on, various geographic areas, they pulled some really valuable detail out in terms of what has become the most important to people. So this is based on the EY Consumer Index, and they came up with 5 categories through a vast research project to see what has become important to people throughout this pandemic in terms of consumerism. So the very first thing is affordability first. So for 32% of consumers, affordability is the most important thing. And that means living within their means and their budgets and focusing less on brands and more on product functionality. So it's no secret the pandemic has had wide sweeping economic impact. And so there may be folks that were less concerned with affordability to start, but now they're very, very concerned with affordability. So showing the return on investment for your specific product or service has never been more important. And in 2022, that's something you really need to be thinking about. How can we show the ROI on what people are spending their dollars on in terms of our business. For 25% of people, it was health first. So clearly protecting the health of their family and themselves, and choosing products they trust to be safe, and then minimizing risks in the way that they shop. So this has come down to some very practical things. If you're an insurance agent, and somebody's coming in to buy an insurance policy from you, and they want to see those signs that say what your masking policy is, for instance. They want to know that the products and services that they're buying from you have come from safe facilities. Early on in the pandemic, even sanitizing products, when you're handing them off to people in the stores or doing curbside pickup, was super important. And so that health factor is still at the top of people's minds. For 16% of people, trying to minimize their impact on the environment and buying brands that reflect their beliefs is one of the top considerations. So kind of along with the pandemic, we also have a societal focus on the environment. We started seeing this trend way before the pandemic started, but it has just continued to gain traction. So that is still an important consideration in 2022. Number 4, 15% put society first. So basically working together for the greater good and buying from organizations they find to be honest and transparent. That is key. Honesty and transparency has always been key in business, but the pandemic sort of pulled back a layer on business and how businesses were taking care of employees, how businesses were taking care of customers. We got into some very ethical issues with the pandemic, and people have really taken note of that, and they are evaluating businesses on how they are handling those specific issues. We've also in the pandemic, we have experienced wide swings in terms of the divide of what we classify as being the greater good. So people are evaluating each other on those things. They're also evaluating your business on those things. We get into a little bit of PR in that way, and we can talk about the best way to sort of convey those messages. So number 5 is putting experience first. So we had sort of this wave of lockdowns. People were spending more times in their homes. That changed the way they were buying products and services. That changed the way they were choosing what to buy. So sort of this experiential component in terms of buying products and services from businesses has drastically changed. And there's also this element of making the most of the moment because the current situation is so unpredictable. And people really started taking sort of a moment to moment approach in what they were doing versus a super long-term approach, because quite frankly, the long term sort of changed from hour to hour. And so people really have absorbed that into the way they are interacting with businesses and what they find important. So any questions about that? Questions, comments, or anything? Okay. Plus, in terms of how the pandemic has changed consumers are no longer just evaluating you on if you're better than your competition. Yes, that matters. You want to be better than your competition. But the trend is that consumers are evaluating you based on their last great experience. So just because a customer comes in and they had a great experience, and then let's just say they came in and they didn't have such a great experience, they are not necessarily going to be loyal to you and remember that first great experience. A lot of businesses are catering to consumers in such a hyper-focused way that they do have a lot of options out there. and each experience counts, and you're being evaluated each time. They're not really calculating their experience with you on what the collective benefit of their experience has been. It's really from experience to experience, which means you are at risk of losing them if they don't have such a great experience with you at any point in that buyer's journey. So that's something to really take into consideration. So one of the ways that businesses had to pivot is basically everything kind of went into the digital world. So if you are already in the digital world, you probably had to add extra elements to that digital process with your consumers. We had businesses having to pivot into going into online ordering. I mean, across the board, the digital world became the world in which consumers were just immersed and in how they were buying products and services. And so what they expect from you, and for some businesses, this can be, more complicated than others, but they expect that seamless digital process. I was talking with a client recently. They are doing a hiring campaign, and basically they are not going to be able to compete in that hiring campaign along with their competitors if they don't have an app that people can easily apply. And so they are having to develop an app to be able to give their potential employees a seamless process to apply. And that's something that, like it or not, it's here to stay. And along with that, they expect that hyper personalized experience. So anytime in your marketing, anytime in your experience with your consumers, that you can make it a hyper personalized experience, that's something to take into account. So, let's say that you do an email campaign. That could be something as simple as making sure your email says, "Hello, Jen," instead of a blanket introduction. They are expecting that from you, and any way that you can include that will benefit you. The other thing is this: a lot of times, and it's perfectly understandable, there are, in your business, if you're a business leader and you're not necessarily part of the direct marketing team, you have so much on your shoulders as a business leader. So it's hard to, dedicate a lot of time in truly evaluating your marketing, because sometimes you're just, lucky to sort of have a marketing campaign going. But it is important to make that data evaluation an important part of what you do, whether you are working with an agency to do that, whether you're carving out time, whether you're getting some of your in-house folks, involved and developing their skill sets to be able to do this. But it's not enough to put the campaign out there. It's not enough to do a direct mail campaign. You really need to know, what is the actual impact of that? What is the ROI on that? So you can be good stewards of your marketing. You need to be looking at, how well is your website performing? How much traffic are we getting? What pages are they looking at? Without data sort of leading the way, you could be wasting a ton of marketing dollars. So make sure that you're including data when you're evaluating your marketing. The other thing is that consumers expect, they don't just like it, but they are at the point where they are expecting that customer service is holistic. It's not just a department in your business. That means that everyone from the janitor to your CEO needs to know what the expectation is for customer service. And if you have a customer service process, every single person in your company, I don't care what their role is, needs to know that, because there are different people, there are different departments, there are different ways people are going to be engaging in your business. And remember, they're evaluating you on their last great experience. And if not everybody is on board with what that customer service expectation is, then you are taking a risk on them being able to have that great experience across the board. So a good holistic approach example, two of my favorite companies in terms of what they do with their marketing, and they've been good at it for a pretty long time now. One is Patagonia, and this comes from the Patagonia website. So On Patagonia, they're very clear, not just with sort of these statements you see here, but in all areas of their marketing in conveying sort of this holistic approach. What can you expect with a well-rounded experience with our company? So, they guarantee everything they make. And one of the reasons is because durability means that less energy will be consumed. And that means they are supporting their mission of being good environmental stewards. They believe that you should know how your clothes are made. So they're very transparent about that. They want to keep your gear in play. So this is like counterintuitive, right? So if you purchase something from Patagonia, you can buy used, you can trade your gear in, you can get your gear fixed from them, so that it's not just all about consuming. They're taking sort of the durability, long-term approach, but that goes such a long way for having consumers trust what they're doing. And then for every sale they give back. So they have a 1% pledge of sales that go towards preservation and restoration of the natural environment. And so I'm not saying that you have to copy these specific details. What I am saying is if a consumer can't arrive to your website or they can't tell what your specific pillars would be, then that's something for you to think about and make sure that you're putting it out there in a way that is transparent and obvious to your consumers so that they know that you are taking a holistic approach to what you're doing. Any questions about that? Good. Okay. All right. So trend number 2 that we're going to talk about is something called corporate social responsibility. And it relates really well to trend number 1, and you'll see how. So first of all, what is corporate responsibility? So one of the things that 2022 consumers are really, really interested in are businesses that demonstrate ethics, transparency, and inclusion, not just towards an external cause, but internally by how you treat your workforce and your customers. We have seen a plethora of stories throughout the pandemic of people, sometimes making a mass exodus from a business based on how they were treated as employees. Everybody has a phone in their pocket where they're documenting these things. And so people are evaluating you. They're paying attention to what is important to you, basically beyond making money, and not just in a glossed over way, but in a really, really committed way. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I just sort of explained why it's important in 2022. It's because we've had 2 years of basically constant upset, not just in our own lives, but in the business world. Those stories are being documented. There are a lot of businesses kind of being exposed for the ways that they haven't been ethical and transparent. And so those topics are at top of mind for consumers. So how do you approach corporate social responsibility, or CSR for short? So there are some important things to consider, and it sort of breaks down into 4 categories right now in what we're seeing. And so to address corporate social responsibility, you want to think about how your businesses are approaching these 4 things that I'm going to talk about next. The first is environmental responsibility. So consumers know that business is a large contributor to environmental strain. That's across the board. I mean, just going into our offices, the paper we use for printers, manufacturing is at a whole other level. But no matter what kind of business you do, there's some sort of environmental strain. People are really tuned into that right now. So what they want to know is, how are you offsetting this environmental strain in your business or your organization? This could be something as simple as, hey, we have a pledge that we do in our office recycling, right? It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. It doesn't have to be a 1% pledge like Patagonia if you're not quite there yet. But how are you offsetting the environmental strain that business causes? There was a study done where there were 2 direct mail letters that went out. One was printed on paper, and at the bottom it said, this paper is made from recycled materials. there was a strong call to action in the letter. Again, content of the letter the exact same. The list that they send it to was evaluated for the same criteria. They got more than a 50% response from the letter that was printed on the piece of paper that said this is made from recycled material. All other things being as equal as they could make them. So little things like that count. I don't want you to think that you have to sort of, become all solar tomorrow or something huge. It can start with a small step, but at least make that step. And then how are you conveying your environmental stewardship, right? So it could be as simple as, hey, we're going to use recycled paper, or it could be social media post that you are saying, hey, we're launching a green program at our business, and these are the things that we're going to kick it off with. You can make that fun and engaging for your audience, but if the only people that know about it are you, that's great. You're still doing your part, but it's also important to let your audience know that you're doing those things. So one example, another company that I really, really like what they do with their marketing is Subaru. They've been at it a long time. They really know what they're doing. They hone in super heavily. In fact, they hang their hat on pathos, that emotional connection with people. So they're a good overall example to look at. But in terms of environmental stewardship, when you think Subaru, right or wrong, you link them with environmental responsibility. This is an ad that they had out talking about their eco-friendly retailer program. And at the bottom, you can see the ways that they are highlighting that they are doing those things. And then if you go on their website, you can read stories about that involve their employees and consumers and organizations they're donating to, and the good work that they're doing. So they bring in that storytelling element into their website and their social media as well. This is from Patagonia. So this is from their website. This is another good example of environmental stewardship. So they simply say, we're in the business to save our home planet. And that they are taxing themselves, which is a really interesting way to put it, but they're basically doing a self-imposed 1% earth tax for the planet to support the things that they feel are important in that way. So these are just some examples of corporate responsibility at work. But again, do what you can on the scale that you can. All right, the second thing that is important for corporate social responsibility is ethical responsibility. So ethical responsibility means that you have fair business practices across the board at every single level. That means with your employees, with your stakeholders, with your consumers. People are really interested in how your employees, stakeholders, and consumers would rate you. So things like testimonials are more important than ever. People talking about you is always going to be more impactful than you talking about yourself. And if you really put your money where your mouth is in terms of getting real data from your employees and stakeholders and customers so that you can improve, that is going to serve you well in terms of corporate social responsibility. And then how are you conveying your ethical responsibility is extremely important. So here is an example of probably one of the more famous examples of corporate social responsibility. This is Dan Price with Gravity Payments. Some of you may have heard this story, but he is a business owner in Seattle. And he is the one that took a huge pay cut. He took a $1 million pay cut so that he could pay every single employee $70,000. And he has a 120 member staff team at that time. People had mixed reactions to this. Some thought, oh, this will never work, but they have done incredibly well with this. And people really took note of this level of corporate social responsibility. Now, of course, we can't all as business leaders go out and do something that drastic, but finding ways that you can make sure things are ethical within your business for everyone. That means equal pay for equal work. That means inclusion. That means making sure that you are actually asking the people within your business what could make it better. Those things really stand out in terms of your business and also how consumers are evaluating you. So philanthropic responsibility. One thing I know about businesses in the Shenandoah Valley is that so many of you are doing such great work in terms of how you're giving back. And one of the things that I say is people don't do business with businesses, they do business with people, and they like doing business with people that give back. So many people are, and businesses, like I said, in the Shenandoah Valley are doing this, but you also want to make sure that your consumers know that you're doing it. And we'll talk about how you can do that. One of the things that you need to think about is your philanthropic responsibility aligned with your mission? One of the things that 2022 consumers, and even prior to 2022, because we live in this digital world, there is sort of this wall between us and like what is on the internet, but people are still really good at understanding what is authentic. People are pretty good at understanding, are you just doing good charitable work because it's sort of a checklist item, or is it something that you're passionate about and that it's aligned with your mission? Again, are your philanthropic responsibility efforts authentic? And one of the best ways to make sure that that's the case is to have philanthropic efforts that, again, resonates with something that either you or your employees are extremely passionate about. When, I know for like our company, we have people that are super into like the efforts with the SPCA, right? They have stories about why that's important to them. When you think of Dave Thomas of Wendy's, adoption was super important to him. And that was a big part of Wendy's philanthropic efforts. So whatever it is, just make sure it's something that is coming directly from the heart or directly from yourself or your employees. That is how it will resonate the most. And make sure you're telling the story of why it's important and why you have chosen those specific philanthropic efforts. All right. And so how are you conveying the efforts? So let's take a look at some examples. So again, Subaru, they have this whole campaign called Share the Love. You can see there they've donated $170 million over 12 years. Again, you don't have to be at that scale. That's totally fine. But doing a campaign around your giving, doing a campaign for raising money is always a good way, easy way to get the word out there. And again, you want to formulate that in the form of a story of why it's important. The other thing that you want to be attuned to is, let's say that you're a company and you're like, okay, we have these certain topics we're really, really passionate about. And then we sort of have a bucket that we can put aside to respond to what is happening in real time in the world. That's a really, really good idea. That's a great way to approach your philanthropic efforts. It's tying back into that kairos where you are doing the right thing at the right time. So a good example of this is, we've had so many devastating wildfires, and Subaru has responded to that in real time with a campaign to dedicate money to replant 1 million trees in the forest that were devastated by wildfires. So connecting your charitable giving to real world events or real world community events that happen, that's a really good way to sort of make sure that you're not only giving, but you're able to react in real time. All right, so the next bucket in terms of corporate social responsibility are economic considerations. So of course, we're all in the business to make money, or if you're a nonprofit, you're in the business of getting grant donations to support or individual donations to support so that you can keep your organization running. But what is driving you besides that? So people are really interested in what drives you besides just making money. Again, people like to do business with sort of businesses and people that are taking a holistic approach to things. So what's important to you besides making money? What decisions do you make for the greater good over the bottom line? So I see this a lot with businesses and organizations in the Shenandoah Valley. This could look like, hey, you know what? We could use a large catering company for our event, but instead we're going to use an entrepreneur that has a small catering business. Instead of doing business with, to get office supplies from one of the big retailers, we're going to use a local vendor for that. Decisions like that make a difference in how people evaluate your corporate social responsibility. So are you doing some things that are for the greater good over the bottom line? A big one is there equal pay for equal work? Right now in society at large and throughout the pandemic, because the economy had such fluctuation, there's been this big discussion about equal pay for equal work. We have gone through and are still in some ways going through the great resignation, where people are leaving jobs because they feel like they've been treated unfairly. So, for some of you, you're not just trying to sell products and services. Some of you are also trying to attract a workforce. So these are some of the considerations to keep in mind with that. And then again, how are you conveying your economic responsibility? So remember, you want to do these things in an authentic way for your company, but you also want to make sure that your consumers are aware of that. So some of the examples that I provided in how people are putting the information on their website, certainly sharing it on social media, is important, so that information is readily available there for your potential audience to see. And we will get into some ways that you can do that in greater detail. That could be a whole presentation in and of itself. But we will get into some more of that in the next couple of sessions and how exactly to do that. All right. So I am not sure what time we are at. Can anybody tell me?
It is just a few minutes, so that's perfect timing.
Okay, perfect. So what I wanted to do then is just open up the floor to any questions people might have or anything they want to delve into further. One thing I do want to know while you're thinking of questions, one of the things that we get asked a lot and people seem to be kind of confused or maybe a little hesitant about is, well, how do I convey like my philanthropic, my charitable giving for my business in a way that doesn't come across as like humble bragging or, in a way that just doesn't feel authentic? The way that we approach it at Converge and the way that, in marketing that we suggest that you approach it across the board is take that opportunity to essentially cross market to the organization that you're supporting. So if you're going to donate to Blue Ridge CASA, for instance, make it less about your donation and more about the great work that CASA is doing. It's fine to say, hey, we are so thrilled to be able to donate $10,000 to Blue Ridge CASA. It's fine to put that in there, but make the rest of it about the great work Blue Ridge CASA does. Make the rest of it about driving people towards their website. Make the rest of it about here's how you can get involved as a volunteer. So basically you are cross-marketing for that organization and less about marketing your good work, even though you are going to highlight that, and that is fine. But that's a really good way to approach it that you can kind of feel really good about, that is still authentic, and hopefully feels a little less intimidating and sort of like that humble brag vibe, which we want to avoid. All right, any other questions? Can we get your email address, please? I missed the tail end. Absolutely. My email address, I'll just pop it back up on the screen.
You can also find them on the chamber website and the business directory if you need it too.
Yes, you can. It is Brooke at weareconverge.io. So you can feel free to email me, call, or whatnot. You can also email me every Friday at 4:45 p.m. We send out a marketing email that has some juicy tips in there, news. We're covering some of these trends right now as well. So if you would like to be added to that list, feel free to email me and I will make sure to add you.
If you're not on that list, I highly recommend it. They are fantastic emails. So be sure and sign up for those. Does anybody have any questions as we're wrapping up?
Oh, we had one new message.
Yeah,
It's
Jen, the secret is
Evan.
it's from Brooke, not Evan. You heard
Yeah.
it here.
Yes, I do a lot of ghostwriting. So at 4:45 p.m. on Fridays, I am Evan.
Now you know the secret, but
Now you know the
they're
secret.
excellent emails. So, well, thank you, Brooke. This is fantastic information. We will post the recording later, and I put the link in there for part 2, which will be held exactly 1 month from today. The dates line up. It'll be March 16th for our Lunch and Learn. Brooke, we really appreciate your time. We appreciate all of you all being here today. Fantastic information. I'm excited to dive in. I think it's nice. There are so many more ways to connect with our audience now, but the nice thing is so many of them are easily accessible. They're free in many ways. So it's just a matter of figuring out what problem are we solving, because we're all solving something, and how do we get out there to the right audience. So this was fantastic information, and we appreciate everybody's time. We're wrapping up right here at 1 o'clock. So hope you'll have a great rest of the day. We do have business after hours tomorrow night at Strong Life Integrated Wellness, which is the CrossFit Stanton Gym in Stanton. That'll be a really fun one. That'll be a combined business after hours and ribbon cutting to celebrate their new enhanced offerings and new name. So hope to see you all there. Always check out our calendar to find out what's going on, how you can be involved. And of course, you can reach out to any of us here at the Chamber with questions or comments or things that you'd like to see on some of these webinars. So hope everybody has a fantastic, oh, do you want to say something?
Oh, I have one more request. And if you don't want to, that's totally fine. You can just stop your video. But can I take a screen grab of all of us? Because normally I would take a picture of the group, but Zoom. So here we go.
Everybody smile.
If everybody is good to go, if you can just smile, ready, smile. Okay, hold it. All right. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.